This is a psychological term with which you should be familiar. It is inference, observation, confusion. Now, everyone knows what it is. We just don't call it that. We call it jumping to conclusions. Now, the reason we bring this up, has anybody made an observation about you? And they were making an inference observation. They were kind of confused with what was really going on, but they do the conclusion nonetheless. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they get it wrong. A lot of times they get it wrong. Well, if you are a person with Asperger syndrome, chances are you may have experienced this more than others. But particularly when it comes to your autism, your Asperger syndrome, the people make observations and they really don't know what they're talking about. They're just jumping to conclusions. And who knows, maybe they jump in the right spot. Maybe sometimes they actually get it right. And sometimes this is very offensive. Typically it's not offensive, it's just kind of odd. So we call it just weird observations. You know, not necessarily wrong, but a lot of times they're wrong. Not necessarily offensive, but a lot of times offensive. Well, what are some of these conclusions to which other people jump? What are some of these weird things that they sometimes get wrong? Or what are some of the weird things they say about us, people with Asperger syndrome? Well, I got a list of 5 things. Some of these we've mentioned in past videos, but we're on the topic, so we're going to include those in this discussion. And number 1 is one of those. We're just going to touch on this very briefly. But people will say, you don't look autistic. Now, why would they say that? Apparently because they have some pre-conclusion of what an autistic person looks like. And the fact of the matter is, if you are autistic, then obviously you look autistic. Because if you're autistic, well, that's what an autistic person looks like. You don't look like you have Asperger syndrome. You don't look like you have high-functioning autism. Yeah, actually you do if you have those traits. Let's don't talk about that because, yeah, we already know that. But number 2 is this, and this one you hear a lot from other people with autism. And that is they will say something to the effect that you are not a label, which means, and I really don't like this one because what they're saying is you don't have an identity. I mean, your identity is really kind of broad spectrum. You have autism, but we're going to throw away the term Asperger syndrome. We're going to throw away the term high-functioning autism, and we're just all going to be autistic. Well, the fact of the matter is people with autism are very different based upon the severity of how much their autism limits their life functioning. And so we need those labels. We need those identities so we know what kind of treatment or not treatment that people require. And when you throw away our identity, and by the way, you should embrace your identity. A little bit off topic here, so excuse me while I sermonize for just a second, but what is your identity? You should write this down. I mean, literally, or type it on your computer, whatever. But you should write this down. What is your identity? What is your name? What is your religion? What is your political ideology? What is your sociological ideology? Know who you are. What is your race? What is your sex? Okay, you got 2 options. You're XX or XY. That's it. Anything else is identity confusion. And there's some people who love to confuse our identities because that is how they control our thoughts. That's how well, it's thought reform. So it's kind of like you take a lump of clay, you know, we talked about this in other videos a long time ago. Take a lump of clay and you mold it into whatever you want. Well, the clay lost its identity because it started out, if you remember this from, first, second grade, maybe they don't still do this, but they would give us these perfectly shaped rectangle lumps of clay. That was their identity. The identity was it was a rectangle. So we had to, before we turned it into an elephant, which wound up being an ashtray. But before we would turn it into an elephant/ashtray, we had to destroy that rectangle identity. That's what they're doing when they're taking away your identity. If you have Asperger syndrome, embrace that. Don't throw it away. If you have high-functioning autism, which I believe is synonymous with Asperger syndrome, don't trash that. That's part of your identity. You know, everything else about you, part of your identity. You know, your hair color, your height, your age, all of those things know who you are. So when somebody tries to remold you into something else, they're going to have a hard time doing it because, you're just frozen in place. They try to thaw you out, so they can refreeze you in a different form. Nah, you know who you are. Don't let them do it. End of sermon. All right, number 3, some people say, well, the reason you're autistic, and these are people who actually believe that you are autistic, they will say, you must have been vaccinated. Now, why would they say that? Well, obviously, they think that the vaccination that you had caused your autism. Why do they think that? Well, there's these stupid conspiracy theories floating around out there, and people tend to believe nonsense, and I can't think of anything any more nonsensical than that particular lame conspiracy theory. Vaccination does not cause autism. Autism is something that you have from birth. It's congenital. So I say from birth, you actually had it before birth from what I've studied, from what I've read. So you come out of the womb autistic. So why do they think there's a relation between vaccination and autism? Well, I think it's because when you get vaccinated and when you are first children or first identified as being autistic, it's about the same time. So nobody says autism therefore causes vaccination. Can't do that. Doesn't make sense. But they can say, well, I see. The vaccination caused the autism. Total nonsense. There's no scientific research out there anywhere. Well, if you know of some, you can tell me about it in the comment section. But to my knowledge, there's no scientific evidence out there, even a scintilla of evidence that suggests that that's true. It's just nonsense. Just totally stupid. But people believe stupid things. I mean, all of us believe something stupid. And where that came from, I don't know, but I remember vaguely being vaccinated when I was, 4 or 5 years old? I didn't know what was going on. My parents said, we're going to go to the doctor's office and get vaccinated. It hurt. They didn't tell me about that part. But, and I left a scar on my arm. I think I still got it. I haven't seen it for a while. And that was about almost 65 years ago. But that didn't cause my autism. Autism was there before the vaccination. It precedes the vaccination. So you could vaccinate, please don't, but you could vaccinate a newborn baby. It doesn't cause autism. Baby's stupid. I don't know that much about vaccinations. But what I do know this is totally off topic, but I do remember this. Going to that same doctor's office when I was, like 14 years old, and they were going to give me some kind of a flu shot, and they were going to give it to me in my thigh. Well, that's what they told me, but when the nurse gave me the shot, they shot me in the rear end. I mean, that was embarrassing, I had to show my rear end to this nurse. And my conclusion was, and maybe I was just jumping to conclusions, but my conclusion was that this nurse didn't pay attention in nursing school because she should have known the difference between a thigh and the rear end. But it didn't matter. I got the flu shot, and I don't know if I got the flu or not, but that one hurt too. Number 4 is this. People will say that we're just all a little bit autistic. Okay, that's not true. You're either autistic or you're not autistic, but there is a spectrum and there is a line that is clinically drawn. And if you're on this side of the line, you're autistic. If you're on that side of the line, and it's kind of arbitrary, to be honest with you, but someone decided who knows a lot more about this stuff than I do, and they've decided this is where the line is drawn. So technically, clinically, if you're on this side of the line, you're autistic. If you're on that side of the line, you're not. But there are neurological conditions, not just kind of guessing based on behavior. There are neurological conditions that define what is autism and what is not autism. And if you don't have those physiological conditions, you're not autistic, but you can display traits of autism. And in that sense, everybody does. So when somebody says, we're all a little bit autistic, it could be they're just speaking from ignorance, or it could be what they're saying is everyone has some traits of autistic, they just don't articulate it properly. But, we know what they mean, so we give them a pass. So, there are some people who are shy. A lot of autistic people are shy. Not all of them, but some of them. Well, many of them. I think most of them are. Or there could be somebody who just doesn't like to look people in the eye for whatever reason. That's a trait that is very common with autistics. So, yeah, let's give them a pass on that one, but it's not technically accurate. Everybody's not autistic. Who is autistic? Autistic people. Number 5 is this. They will say to you, you are not autistic. Now, those two, number 4 and 5, they contradict each other. One of them says everybody's autistic, and the next one says you're not autistic. Well, if everyone is, obviously it's not the same person saying this. Or if it is the same person, they're not really smart, But somebody may say that you're not autistic because, number 1, they don't know what autism is. Number 2, they may be familiar with low-functioning autism and you're high-functioning. Therefore, you're not autistic in their mind and their way of thinking. They're jumping to a conclusion. Or another reason they could say that is because you're pretty good at masking. And you cover it up. Very good. And congratulations. I'm not sure that's always a good thing to do, always necessary, but sometimes it is. But if that's something that you want to do, I can't say you're wrong for doing it, but sometimes you fool people. And they say, nah, you're not autistic because you don't behave autistic. And a lot of these people, maybe they know the traits of autism and maybe they don't, but people say things, But whatever makes them feel smart, they say it. But take that as a compliment if you want to, and maybe it is, that you seem normal to me. Okay, whatever. I don't know if that's a big deal. If someone tells me that I'm not autistic, yes, I am. Well, who is qualified to make that decision? Well, I've got three qualifiers for someone who can tell me that I am or that I am not autistic. Number 1, they need to be a certified or licensed therapist. Number 2, they have to specialize in autism. Number 3, they need to be objective. So all 3 of those things have to fall in place. Now that person will tell me whether I am or not autistic with a reasonable degree of almost absolute accuracy. And I found that person. I was very fortunate and to find a therapist who was objective, who was very qualified, that's all she did. I mean, she dealt with autistic people. That was her profession. That was it. She would work with people with autism, children, adults, whatever. And that was basically her forte. That's what her practice was all about. So the reason I chose her is because you can fake it. I mean, you can fake autism or you can fake not having autism. And you may not even know you're doing it. You could be doing it subconsciously. So I needed somebody who would see through the faking, even if I wasn't doing it intentionally, and they would give me an accurate assessment. And I found that person very fortunately. That was, I was 65 years old, so it's been almost 5 years ago. 2 rectangles on the screen. Click one of those if you want to keep on talking. Let's keep on if you want. If not, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you all next time.